It's been a long time. We shouldn't have left you without a dope beat. Step two, step two, step two, step two, step two. Baby girl. What would you do to get to me? What would you say to have your way? Would you give up or try again? Never hesitate to let you in. Now would you be yourself or play your role? Tell all the boys or keep it low. I say no, would you turn away or play it off? Or would you say oh?
Typography. Welcome to my world. My world. Spicy, salty, and sweet. Thirsty, I'm unhappy, till we meet again. Let's start with typography. As with all aespa logos, we were first introduced to this era with motion graphics displaying the logo. Lately SM has been trying their hand at more graffiti art styles with releases such as Birthday, Killer and now My World. The contrast between the sharp edges of the type and the balloon texture is brilliant in my opinion. Balloon textures with type has been a style that has been growing in popularity on Instagram for the past 2 years. The logo reminds me of the older style of Leo Andrade's work. It's a style I wanted aespa to throw their hand at for a while, even if I'm not slightly enthusiastic about the execution. One day I'm going to sit down and finish my script breaking down the creative direction behind aespa, but all you need to know for now is that aespa's art direction is heavily reliant on anti-design and acid graphics. These two work in marriage as they follow the same principles, bending the core principles of design as we know it and experimenting with various textures, aesthetics and styles to create work that challenges mainstream design. It's a good chunk of the reason why I've always stayed interested in aespa. Now with that being said, aespa's typography will never follow your typical rules and will oftentimes go more experimental rather than practical. I've always found myself conflicted with this one aspect of aespa's creative direction. It's not like I'm a stranger to this style, it's the main one I'm inspired by and consume from other designers. I just never feel satisfied with most of aespa's logos and always feel like they would be done better if they were done by independent designers who have honed their skills to perfect the styles rather than in-house designers who are learning and working at the same time. My World's logo is aespa's first unreadable logo for no reason other than to be different, as the logo itself doesn't quite match the album's creative direction or even sound at all. I do get the desire not to appeal to mainstream design principles, but clearly as we've seen, they aren't going for anti-design this comeback. So why not just make the logo readable? It's a bit try-hard in its attempt, and the logo is even worse in flat form. You can somewhat make out the words in balloon form where shadows and highlights benefit the eyes and showcase the dimensions that separate letters. You don't get this liberty with a flat design, as the words are completely unreadable from afar and the thin stroke around the letters don't help much with differentiating each one. If this was a comeback much similar to Savage, I wouldn't be hammering this point home much given the point of Savage was anti-design. That's not what My World is. My World is attempting to put us in the real world where aespa exists, and there's an insane level of normalcy with the photography. There's nothing going against the grain here, so the unreadable typography just doesn't match with their intentions in my opinion. Not the biggest fan personally, but I appreciate it for what it's worth in a way. They use the same style for Welcome to My World's logo and it looks like utter dog shit, not gonna lie. I mean, of course it would. Once again, nobody can see what the hell this says. It just looks like a bunch of chunky text bunched up together. Not fun to me. Spicy's logo follows the same style as My World, however this is the best execution of it out of the bunch. The letters are legible in both vector and 3D form, allowing us to appreciate the details in the typography. The center of the letter Y is designed to look like a devil's tail, while the dot typically located above the eye known as the tittle, is swapped out for an angel's halo. These were common design techniques with typography in the late 2000s and is a nice nod to the era itself. Not to mention, the balloon concept works beautifully here to convey the bratty, spunky and fun nature of the song. It's honestly one of my favorite aespa logos of all time. I think where the balloon style of the typography fails the most is actually with the main group logo. To me, the execution is extremely sloppy and borderline lazy. It just looks like the logo but chunky and in chrome, but the psychics don't match, since the logo floats in the motion graphics the same way the My World logos do. I don't associate thick, dense chrome with being lightweight, so it left me displeased with the choice. Why wouldn't you make the group's logo match the same balloon art style to keep consistency? I was disappointed by this when I saw a clear picture of it, because to me, a balloon version of the group's logo easily could have been done to match the style of Leon's work. I'm Unhappy features the same graffiti style, but this one leans more comparable to Birthday rather than My World. I think it would have been cute if this one was animated with little horn devil faces around it, but personally I also love it the way it is. It encaptures the message of the song. Now the sound, not so much, but I fear that's going to be a trend with this album regardless. I think this style could have worked with this album much better if they followed through with its slightly creepy sound throughout the project, from Welcome to My World in the same way Red Velvet's Birthday does. For a song that is alt-pop wrapped in harmonies in the ending, it does feel like this logo could do better to convey that feeling rather than conform to the city-inspired typography style that seems to be consistent throughout the project. Anyways, continuing on to more logos which no one on this planet could read, we have Salty and Sweet. This one pisses me off so bad because there's so many better ways they could have gone with this title. Literally it was made to showcase two styles, one for salty, one for sweet, and instead you decided to just do one ugly ass unreadable style for two whole ass words that we once again cannot read. It sucks all the fun out of logo making for me. I was not a fan. This title was the best prime for bullying interpretation, and it's a pity that they went more liquid metal inspired with it. It's also the only logo that doesn't have any graffiti inspiration, which is even more confusing. Then we have Thirsty, which reminds me of the graffiti I typically would see around my city. This sort of reminds me of Ice's logo. This one honestly isn't that bad, but after hearing the song I do think that it could have gotten a better logo. This logo makes it seem like it's going to be very hip-hop centered, but neither the song nor even the track video is anywhere near that realm. Thirsty is more R&B mixed with trap, not enough to justify the more urban style of this logo. I think they should have leaned into the sweet, cutesy feel of this song and made the logo a nice thick cursive. The original typography just doesn't do the song justice. It almost feels like the logo was made before they had conceptualized the track video, which isn't a good thing. The lack of cohesion here unfortunately makes Thirsty one of my least favorite type moments from the album. Till We Meet Again follows the same graffiti-inspired typography with the same missed execution, given that the song itself is acoustic-based and the visual concept is to match Welcome to My Worlds. The rest of these logos can maybe make an argument about different interpretations of the songs with the type, but without a doubt, this song has no business having a logo like this. My final thoughts on the typography is that I'm whelmed this time around, which is better than the blood-pulsing anger I felt with Girls. This album's art direction lacks consistency, so I think it's an absolute shame that the one aspect where a consistent theme was picked, it actually crippled the art direction more. All logos except Salty and Sweet were designed to match the city concept from the Strange Phenomenon concept, therefore resulting in the graffiti-based style. The issue with this is that the concept is in no way even close to representing the album, leaving these songs to feel disjointed from their respective logos. While these logos are much better than the ones done from Girls' era, the same problem plagues them. These logos have no interest in giving any meaningful context to the songs and solely exist in a bubble on its own, which takes out all the fun and beauty of the typography. I think another reason that's aiding this feeling is that the team has done this graffiti typography approach already with Killer, Birthday, and just as recent as this year's Stamp on it. Instead of feeling like a special design choice, it just feels like them dipping back into the cookie jar. Even then, with my critiques, I do want to say that I commend SM for keeping up their streak of custom logos for their artists these days. It's always going to take more work to create a custom logo rather than just download a font, so I do applaud the team for their effort and I do still appreciate it, especially as we are currently drowning in the corny ass bullshit lister. Concept, aespa's real world. Now let's move on to the concept. The concept for my world has caused some very heated discourse for many reasons in which I've noted down and will be discussing now. For starters, some people have felt like my world represents aespa losing their unique charm as this album does not take place in Kwangya. The album is rooted in aespa's real world, an aspect that to be fair, existed since aespa's debut. However, listeners have felt that whenever the real world is showcased, the music has not been impressive. Look no further than the unpopular flop, Life's Too Short. Given SM's history, the tides of public opinion grew weary on whether or not a real world-oriented aespa comeback could live up to their Kwangya hits such as Savage and Next Level. With this lack of Kwangya, also became a lack of experimentation, which was a huge draw for people who tuned into aespa. A lot of people looked forward to aespa's comebacks, which never looked like your typical K-pop photoshoot with a stereotypical pretty background and just the girls being pretty. Not to mention, if the photoshoot was experimental, typically the music followed as well, which is common for SM entertainment. There was an appeal of uniqueness to aespa's creative direction and music that their audience thoroughly enjoyed from era to era that was now at threat of being gone. However, the rebuttals of these points is also what adds to what made this a heated debate. NINI'S have argued that aespa's real world has always been a part of their concept and this was always going to happen. The real world does not threaten Kwangya because both have existed simultaneously and should have been treated in the same vein as Red Velvet's Red and Velvet side. Now what is my commentary towards this? Both sides are equally right and wrong. I had to side with NINI'S at first, puzzled as to why everybody was pretending that aespa's real world side came out of the blue. It's always been a part of their career, it's literally in their name. aespa is a combination of avatar and experience, the name translating to aspect in English as well. The whole journey is about the girls experiencing a new world. When they are first introduced to us, we see them all in normal settings or world. When episode 2 of SMCU came out, Giselle was literally in class. I don't think they ever hid their real world origins. However, this doesn't exactly mean that NINI'S are right either. aespa's real world was simply introduced to us, but SM has done a piss poor job at establishing it. There's this running theory that aespa's real world is heavily bullying inspired, but where exactly was the evidence for this? The season's greetings don't count as they have no association with the story and SM shows its concepts for those as they please. The only bullying we've ever seen featured came this year from aespa Week, and one piece of evidence such as this doesn't hold up well against the overwhelming details they've showcased for Kwangya. We practically know how several areas of the world look like. This is not the case with aespa's real world. aespa's real world does not solely take inspiration from bullying. It dips its toes into 90s nostalgia, borrows cinematic storytelling from art house films, gives us a taste of Gen X, toes the line on grunge and even modernized Neo Y2K with East Asian influences, and I still can't wrap my head around the editorial intent of my world. There's simply too much going on here to argue that the real world has any sort of identity at all given the evidence in full context. Both sides were wrong, but at the end of the day, this is solely the fault of SM Entertainment for their poor planning with aespa's story. Had they put more obvious emphasis on aespa's real world gradually rather than throwing everyone a curveball with the inclusion in girls, I highly doubt there would be this mass confusion. You can't put all this focus on this Kwangya universe and only sprinkle tidbits about the real world and expect that to go over well when you begin to focus on the real world aspect. And when I say they focused on it, even that is putting it lightly. Kwangya setting, ridiculous Kwangya lyrics, all the SMCUs still being majority Kwangya related, not to mention the odd releases of the SMCU episodes. You'll never be able to figure out the correct information regarding aespa's story because the answers only come after said era is long past gone. We're always one step behind in the story, and while that may be exciting if this was a Marvel production, this isn't what this is. Kwangya's lore is nonsensical and something only die-hard fans will fully comprehend. It makes no sense not to just provide the story of what's happening at the same time as the new release. Basically poor planning, No sense of storytelling and not understanding your audience is what led to this mess of "they always were like this, you guys weren't paying attention and they've changed to appeal to a wider audience" fight that's going on. Both sides are equally right and wrong. Nothing in aespa's career would have led you to believe they would release a project like My World, simply put. Now does that mean I can't see My World existing? No, actually, I love this idea of focusing on the girls for once rather than this and the A's. My World should put us in aespa's shoes for once rather than feeling like we're watching them in some Marvel movie. Unfortunately, we don't get a chance to do this as the concept changes rapidly throughout the promotional period, which means in the grand scheme of the album, nothing is solid and has substance. Compare this to Savage, in which the concept is meant to guide you through the process of aespa going into sync and expand on this idea of existing within a void. However, I don't think this concept is as hopeless as many feel, and I see what they're trying to do and I actually love it. I just sadly think they didn't execute it correctly, which is the case with most of aespa's releases. They have great ideas but terrible executions, oftentimes bordering on being lazy or not thought out much, which often rears its ugly head in plagiarism allegations. I think it's such an interesting concept to showcase the girls returning back to their real world and have to experience life as regular young adults as if they aren't superheroes in another universe. This is why I was such a fan of I'm Unhappy's track video. It feels like the girls are trying to maintain a sense of normalcy and differentiate between Kwangya and the real world. It reminds me a lot actually of the Chronicles of Narnia series written by C.S. Lewis. For those unfamiliar, the Chronicles of Narnia focuses on 4 siblings, Susan, Peter, Lucy and Edmund, as they stumble into a closet that leads them to this magical place called Narnia. In Narnia, they find out that the place is stuck in winter but never celebrates Christmas due to the evil witch who rules the land. Basically by the end, Aslan, the lion who in that world practically represents Jesus, defeats the witch with the help of the children in a literal war. We see the children grow into grown adults by the end, as in Narnia, time moves quicker than on Earth. Eventually, as they are made to be kings and queens of the land, they forget about their life on Earth until they stumble upon the closet entrance they first came in from. When they enter the wardrobe again, they are shocked to come out as the same age they were when they entered Narnia. From then on in the series, we see the children struggle to internalize that they are meaningless teens on Earth versus the kings and queens they are in Narnia. Peter, the oldest, struggles the most with this change and his emotional turmoil through his fits and fightings. Just from this description alone, you're probably starting to see the connection. 4 children who stumble into another world and help defeat the evil and restore peace to the land, being chosen by the land's martyr as royalty in the place. In this context, the 4 children are Winter, Giselle, Karina, and Ning Ning. Just like the 4 children have titles, Queen Lucy the Valiant, King Edmund the Just, Queen Susan the Gentle and Peter the Magnificent, so do the girls of aespa. Winter is the armamenter, Giselle specializes in cineglass, Karina is the rocket puncher and Ning Ning is the Ed hacker. Just like in Narnia, there is an evil to be defeated in Kwangya named the Black Mamba. The representation of a martyr like Aslan comes in the form of Mavis, who the girls essentially praise in Savage in the same way many religious people praise their respective higher power. So this perspective of the girls returning back to the real world, being forced to separate their roles in Kwangya and being heroes who defeated a villain vs being your average young adult is extremely interesting. It would have been a great way to touch on the sensitive topic that revolves around minors debuting or working in adult-centered industries and how that early peak of success in life could be essentially harmful. This is why I was initially positive regarding the era. It also felt very tongue-in-cheek with the girls saying that the strange phenomenon going on Earth didn't faze them in the news footage. Of course it wouldn't, they practically defeated a villain in another world. I was getting ready for us to see this in the creative direction, and to be fair, it was, but not in a good way, and most people are still confused as to how it all connects. All in all, I'm not against the concept, but the planning for previous eras did not prepare for the transition well, and the concept itself wasn't executed competently. In my opinion, this comeback should have followed the formula that typical teen dystopian worlds do, such as Steven Universe, Narnia, etc. It's not enough to just showcase the world, we need to get into the girls' heads and see their mental states and their overall behavior. A dystopian teen world that I think is more comparable to aespa is Glitch Tech's an animated show that focuses on two teenagers, Hector, nicknamed High Five, and Miko, who work as glitch techs who defeat glitches in games but have to keep this world and identity secret from real-world counterparts, even their parents if I remember correctly. I'm simplifying the premise of the show of course, but basically we get a nice dose of their feelings in and out of the universe, we understand their struggles, their flaws, and even see how these flaws impact their work at times. That's how aespa should work. Phew, that was a lot, sorry, but like I said, I was very excited for this album because this was the concept I had in mind, but it just wasn't executed the way I wished. So now let's touch on the concept photos. Concept photos. Welcome to my world intro version and music video version. Strange phenomenon. I'm unhappy, sweet, and salty, thirsty and spicy. The first set we were treated to were Welcome to My World, which featured the four girls in a desolate location in white apparel. Personally, the only photos I enjoyed from this set were NINI'S and one from Karina's. To me, the photo shoot felt very inspired by Yolanda's Princess by Boa, so I assumed it was intentional given that Boa was featured in the previous SMCU episode. However, being that Welcome to My World has now been released, I'm pretty certain that was just a weird coincidence rather than any actual reference. Regardless, I do understand the point of this photo shoot. It's supposed to be a direct contrast to Girls' photo shoot in which the girls were in black and beige with an intimidating isolated unknown location as the setting. They are supposed to mirror each other basically. Its biggest drawback is the fact that Karina and NINI'S photos have completely different color grading compared to Winter and Giselle's, which throws the entire concept off. The color grading changes the entire interpretation of the set, leaving this inconsistent message from both. For its purpose, it makes sense, but I don't blame most for having a negative reaction towards this set. This was the first thing released after a major long hiatus, expectations were high off the bat and it was an underwhelming start to the era. Then we have the Strange Phenomenon version, and this is where everything pretty much fell apart. The concept for Strange Phenomenon only exists within the motion graphics teasers, which feature bouncy, rule-bending visuals that have a campy, fun feel to them. This is the aespa we have come to know and love. However, this execution of the concept for some reason is not transferred over into photography. This photoshoot is so bizarre, especially in the context of everything else. The grunge aesthetic through a filter I could only describe as Tumblr 2013 was a drastic switch up from the first concept set and felt very outdated at moments. I was questioning whether or not that was the point, given Karina's use of Apple headphones rather than AirPods in her moving teaser. However, wired headphones are still very common in South Korea, so its inclusion is not supposed to be representative of a specific era. These photos aren't hideous, but they were a far cry from the McBilling-inspired aesthetic that this era would soon conclude, and leaving you even more puzzled by its inclusion. It has a very City Girl 2010 feel. These would be cuts I'd expect from a season of America's Next Top Model a decade ago. I think what's making this worse is that this photo set is categorized as being inspired by tabloids and thus paparazzi, but other than Winter's one shot, these are anything but. The girls are intentionally posing, giving chic looks towards the camera. This is not what candid paparazzi shots look like. Think more Gossip Girl for a fictional reimagining of the celebrity stalker. In my opinion, I think a much better approach for this concept set would have been a photoshoot that Ji Kyung had done recently. These very candid street shots matched with more intimate, warm ones that showcase emotion and movement well. This could easily represent the perspective we see of aespa versus how they are in private. The additional strange details in the moving teaser should have been featured in the photos, as it's the only way the concept makes sense in context. The set is called Strange Phenomenon and meant to serve as the tabloid concept of the album, but the photos showcase normalcy and the shots are clean, crisp and intentional rather than candid. The styling was unremarkable as well, an extra insult being Karina photographed in Balenciaga after the scandal that they just had. Being that idols are still being styled in the likes of Dolce & Gabbana and Alexander Wang, I can't say I'm surprised, but this shirt isn't all that to justify the need for its inclusion in this outfit. Quite literally any long-sleeved shirt could have done the same exact job without further giving promotion to a company that recklessly releases campaigns with disturbing breadcrumbs to the abuse of children. It's quite disappointing that aespa's team doesn't think the real world is worthy of the same experimental styling, fun patterns and cutouts that they've legitimized in Gwangnya, given that all of that comes from us. Now, in order not to confuse myself, I'm going to be speaking about concept photos and visuals together in one swoop and include discussions about music to determine execution. Please understand this is not me giving my actual opinion about whether or not I like the song. It's the same way I use the music to analyze why the song logos failed. This video is not a review of the music, and I would like if the comments refrained from overshadowing the discussion with it for the sake of people jumping to conclusions. A common new addition into the SM art direction universe has been music video picture teasers, and I will say that I love this and I hope they do it more often for their female artists. It seems like only the men of the company are allowed to get cool promotional things such as music video teaser pictures, track videos, concept videos and even highlight medleys now, like okay. Anyways, opposed to Strange Phenomenon, these pictures and their execution is done marvelously. Taking a page from their older sisters FX, we are presented aespa being carefree young women through the lens of NINI'S. As I discussed in my Afterlife review, NINI'S-inspired photography has slowly worked its way into being a popular concept for 4th gen with groups such as Stacy, Weekly, IVE, New Jeans and now aespa. Its style was popular in the early 90s meant to combat the over-commercialization that came with the late 80s. The point is to hone in on the natural and organic feel with the use of interior design, lighting, styling and overall composition. Welcome to My World is the best execution of this concept since FX with minimal makeup and composition. I think what's a pity about this concept is that while executed beautifully in its concept, the music video cannot live up to its still frames and even music. Welcome to My World starts off promising with its establishing shots but quickly devolves into a meandering mess only a minute into the video. After the first chorus, the music video loses any urgency to showcase the natural progression of a story. Instead we are stuck in this limbo of watching the girls roam around with awkward angles that don't feel genuine. Compare this to New Jeans' Attention and her remix, which both feature similar scenes but keep focus on the progression with the editing, and the problems with Welcome to My World are burningly clear. In my opinion, the director failed to capture the carefree bonding that Attention, Hype Boy or even Triple S's Generation and Rising does. It didn't feel as natural, which made the focus on these scenes more awkward. However, I don't think it would have been nearly as bad if the editing wasn't also poorly paced. The long focus on these shots give more emphasis on them, which works against the entire music video, like the aforementioned music videos have done. I think it would have been better to have the girls located in a more casual setting that would allow them to act more freely and naturally, as well as give the cinematography more to work with. There's only so much you can do with establishing shots of traveling into a forest, and the way it was executed made the cinematography eventually feel very stagnant. The car scene has too much focus. There's a reason why in Attention it's cleverly weaved in between more action-based shots. The interior of a car can be very constraining, and in general, when we see the interior of cars, especially in relation to the back, our mind immediately associates it with a lack of space and discomfort. I would have loved for the music videos beginning to be more centered around the cityscape before traveling into the forest, which would have offered more variety to work with and could be used as a tool to progress the story. The further the girls run, the more the concrete turns into grass and the buildings turn into trees. I noticed that the use of time was also not appropriately utilized here, despite how much the composition depends on its natural setting. Sunlight is used as context clues to showcase the passage of time to our brains, so it would have been better for the music video to have a more gradual descent from sun rising to sun setting. In the music video, due to the pacing, it feels like we're stuck in daylight only until a minute and 31 seconds before the music video ends, which doesn't give the story space to conclude naturally and leads to the underwhelming feel of the finale. Another issue is that they use the technique of showcasing the ending at the beginning of the music video, and while this technique can work in many cases, I think here it worked against the story progression. Of course we know this will appear, but you still have to build that up for the viewer. Showing her so early takes away the impact of her grand entrance in the epic final chorus. This issue with story progression is one I found has plagued aespa since the very beginning, where SM's writers don't seem to comprehend the basic structure of storytelling and setting up a climax for the big reveal at the end. I also feel as though the music video takes for granted the haunted, eerie feel that the strings of this song brings to the table. It reminds me of Billy's The Village of Perception, Chapter 1, with the mysterious lighting, the lonesome yet natural setting, and the girls posing through each frame as the rain begins to dampen their clothing. I think visually, if this music video followed that same mysterious yet curious setup, it could have shaped out to be one of aespa's best. As is, it's competent with its color grading but incompetent everywhere else. It couldn't hold a candle to the simplistic, yet experimental four walls in terms of storytelling visually, sadly. Next we got I'm Unhappy's concept photos and track video. This one was much more exciting to watch than Welcome to My World, which is confusing given that this is not a main track, but it's fine. I'm Unhappy gives us the angle that I was speaking about earlier, with the girls looking like they are trying to operate under a false sense of normalcy, but it's destroyed by the trauma and memories from Kwangya. At least that's clearly how I interpreted it, especially because at the end they begin to say that they're happy as if they're trying to mask their mental state and pretend they're okay. I will say seeing Winter's scenes, while gorgeous and well acted, did feel like they leaned too closely to Seulgi's 28 Reasons album trailer. Now this could be that both take inspiration from the same tropes and movie, which is fine in a vacuum but reveal a larger issue outside of it. As I pointed out before, lately SM has been reusing concepts and styles across the board for their artists, which anybody could tell you is a bad idea. Each artist needs to have their own identity, and before aespa debuted this was the case. Afterwards, the company's concepts began to feel a bit muddy and familiar. Last year, I pointed out how similar aespa's real-world concept photos and girls felt to Red Velvet's Queendom. Earlier in this video I pointed out the similarities in graffiti typography with 4 other projects under the company coming out back to back, and now we have this. It would be smarter to organize concepts and have some sort of separation between your artists, especially for a group as young as aespa who still needs to establish their look and sound. Avoiding similarities can go a long way in doing so. Regardless of this, I still enjoyed this track video, although Karina seems to me felt jarring in comparison to the rest of the girls. I would have much preferred to see her in the setting of the school's pool, maybe, given how much swimming and water has been associated with Karina up to that point. The first time she meets her eye counterpart, the reflection makes a wave pattern, and in the Next Level SMCU episode, we all know the scene of Karina and Karina joining forces, as well as the text from outside the swimming pool. I would have loved to see maybe a shot of Karina being in there for practice with other girls. They all dive in but she doesn't, and she's stuck staring at her reflection. When she finally dives in, I think a nice wide frame of her appearing to be just a speck in the sea of blue could drive home this symbolism of depression and loneliness. The feeling of drowning in your own sorrow and how hard it is to reach back to the surface. That's just my personal preference though. Salty and Sweet was quite the letdown, so much so that I just don't have much energy to give towards it. It has this girls filter but worse, if anything. Girls at least had some great styling, not sure what in the tacky Blackpink copycat apparel is going on here. Only photo I enjoyed, complete with styling, was Ning Ning. Set design was utter garbage. Like if the creative team misses EXO, they need to just say that instead of dragging these girls to film on the set of Love Shot. I lived for the idea of the chip and the cake. I just think it's unfortunate that it was squandered for this piss poor song and equally piss poor visuals. Very underwhelming, especially as this style is more so in their lane. This is their savage moment of the comeback, and yet they look the most unrecognizable they have thus far into their career. Thirsty was handled by a new team, it seems, bringing in an idea paying homage to the popular 90s sitcom Friends. I love the Thirsty Burger set design as well as Ning Ning being by her computer, as it finally establishes a core element in aespa's art direction. Moments like these are important for an artist's visual identity as it shows consistency. Think Red Velvet and the inclusion of table gatherings, cars and food featured in their music videos. It also has this very warm palette to it, one of my favorite photography styles. It's very sweet, girly and fun. I enjoyed it for what it was. It was fun, but it left me perplexed, especially as this was the last track video. Now on one hand, at the beginning of the era I complained that aespa took all the cool interesting shit from our world, put it in their nonsensical ass Kwangya world, and now every time we see our world, we get this really boring, plain basic ass concept that doesn't represent how cool our world is. Well, it seems as if the team heard me and began to just fucking throw everything at the wall. Hello? The issue with the concept of my world is that it just doesn't have a stable concept. One minute we're doing a homage to the 90s, next minute we're referencing tabloid magazines of the 2000s, but we're also going for this outdoorsy, all natural look. No wait, we actually want a K/J drama inspired aesthetic. No, actually here's a cyber aesthetic. Wait, no, let's do a city aesthetic instead. Girl, what is going on? This is what I was referring to in the concept section before Thirsty even came out. SM isn't bothering to establish what the real world is, and a part of me feels like this is less true to how diverse our world can be and more so what I briefly spoke about in my initial mini review. aespa's creative direction was built off of plagiarism, allowing a look into the already cracked foundation that the group's artistic identity would be. When your whole foundation is derived from ideas that weren't yours, it's oftentimes difficult to expand beyond that, and that is showcased with the real world concept. The real world was made to appeal to every audience rather than stick to one idea and flesh it out fully. It just feels like they're grabbing at any concept that comes to their mind, which leaves a project such as a mini album to feel chaotic and with no correlation. The most I can interpret the concept choices as from an artistic standpoint is maybe these concepts are meant to showcase different pieces of media in the real world to this, but this idea just comes off as very jumbled and directionless. I just don't feel like we, or even in this context, NINI'S needs a fucking content reel of what the human world is. In Kwangya, we are treated to a clear, consistent visual identity, and those same rules should apply in their universe outside of Kwangya. The same way we establish who the girls are in Kwangya, should be the same way we establish who they are on their home planet. The track videos could have been used to give us a look into each member, instead there's no correlation between them, the final project, and what it even represents in the grand scheme of things. It's very disappointing because unlike some, I personally felt like this concept had much more potential if they bothered to do any competent storytelling. For NINI'S to come on Earth and see how life is for the girls and see what the girls go through in the real world. It's not all sunshine and flowers, they have struggles outside of Kwangya, and she gets to see that. I'm not saying we couldn't mix some fun into it, but at this point, the track videos now introduce 3 totally different concepts to the 2 that we got that was mediocre to begin with. 5 concepts for one mini album, and the connection between them are thin and almost non-existent at points. What is the real world? This album was supposed to establish that. Establish the difference in style and feel compared to Kwangya, and ultimately, I think it failed in the end to deliver that. It's ultimately why when Spicy's promotion began, it felt so left field. Nothing up to this point gave us the impression the album was going to be concluded like this. Spicy finally follows up on the McBilling-inspired art direction that they introduced through aespa a week earlier that year to rather mediocre attempts. I found myself bored with the concept photos and dissatisfied with the styling on several occasions. I didn't feel like the team captured the spirit of modernized Y2K well at all as someone who's literally a follower of that aesthetic. There were some attempts that were better than others, but overall, it felt rather outdated, like I was watching teenagers in 2017. I don't doubt that there would be arguments that say that aespa's was true to the time period, but that's not exactly something to applaud. The appeal of modernized lenses on old aesthetics is that we have more resources at hand to give a fresh new outlook on something nostalgic. I just didn't find myself very satisfied with aespa's entry into this popular trend. It was okay in some photos, painfully boring in others. The shots were standard and didn't attempt to have as much fun as they could with the concept other than Giselle's and Ning Ning's. The styling is abysmal, having no idea whether it wants to be sporty, preppy, punk or trendy in general. My favorites were Giselle's, Ning and Winter's preppy fit. I think Karina got the worst end of the stick this time around. Her heels and her preppy fit are still haunting me. Overall, I was bored, which saddens me because I feel like if anyone was primed to cash in on this trend it would be aespa. To me, they got beaten out by the likes of NINI'S, XG, Yana, Billy, the list could go on. It's crazy. Before my world, they seem to at least be motivated to set themselves apart by trying new unique techniques and experimental styling as well. This era, the main concept set feels very muddy, generic and doesn't seem to be interested in establishing a look that's unique to the group. Any new group could have done Spicy's concept photos. I could have done it with my iPhone camera and a trip to the thrift, honestly. Promotional material, aespa's website and Pinterest. During this era, aespa released their first interactive website which featured various pictures that could be decorated with 3D assets. Web design is something that K-pop companies have yet to touch on. In fact, in this generation alone we've only seen 2 key projects that featured it. In 2022, Stake released YoungLove.com, which featured a screen that played a snippet of their upcoming title track. It was clever, but I don't think it compares to the absolute mammoth that was NewJeans' debut, which established a major presence with their website's design. Even down to the fact that the website is redesigned each era to match the new project, which takes an extreme amount of effort to organize. I spoke briefly about how Adore was ahead of the curve in the sense that even SM hadn't yet thrown their hat into the ring of web design despite having a group so heavily inspired by cyber aesthetics. Finally, aespa got their well-deserved interactive website design, which was very fun to play with. I do think more could have been done with the website in relation to the concept, but for their first swing at web design, it's great and functional. I hope moving forward they continue to add features to it, in the same way Adore's creative team does for NewJeans. A lot of cool ideas could be implemented for aespa, more funding for this and less funding of NFTs. Please and thank you. The team also set up a Pinterest account called Spicy Club, which has been updated each day with pictures of the girls and set details from this era. There isn't much to say here, but this was a perfect decision and one of the best executions of a concept from their team yet, in my opinion. I think what would elevate this would be the sections featuring each girl would have photos that could help further establish each girl's identity and interests in a way that the track videos failed to. In fact, maybe it could have helped solidify the concepts in the track video by proving the correlation. Maybe Ning actually is a cheerleader, maybe Karina does indeed have a part-time job as a Thirsty Burger employee. This era is frustrating because none of the decisions are awful at all, besides maybe 1 or 2. Had they bothered to do the bare minimum of connecting things, it could have been one of 4th gen's best art direction yet, but alas, NewJeans' crown remains untapped. Album packaging, intro there, zine there, poster there, tabloid there. Now let's finally touch on the album packaging, cause I have a lot to say. I'll first begin with more sane thoughts and constructive criticism. The intro version features the content from the first concept set, which takes inspiration from boho chic and features a more down-to-earth, natural aesthetic. The photo book comes with a sleeve that when removed showcases a larger photo of the members' version you possess. The photo book itself features collage work on the front and back cover with no text, allowing the photography to speak for itself. There isn't much to write home about regarding this version other than the formatting of the photos are slightly above the other prints of this album. Other than a few awkwardly placed photos on a larger photo, a technique I beg SM to stop doing, I found the way this photo book to be organized quite good until the lyric pages. Most of the lyric pages just aren't interesting, nor even good in some cases. The I'm unhappy page feels very awkward to look at, Karina's photo being placed in the middle with entirely too much white space in between. It also doesn't help that they utilize the original logos for these pages, despite the fact that, as I explained, the urban logos do not match this concept whatsoever. It's baffling that they would even make that decision, given that on the zine version they smartly chose to stick to a standard typeface. I wasn't impressed, I think this version has some gorgeous shots, but it's also thrown off by the stark contrast between the color correction on certain photos, which we saw happen with the original release of the concept photos. It's jarring when put side by side for sure, but there's a good enough mix of both that you could overlook it and just enjoy them for what it is, small and fits nicely in the palm of your hands. The zine version comes with 2 photo books that include content from Spicy and Welcome to My World. The design of Spicy's zine is inspired by tabloid magazines of the late 2000s, signaling the thrilling-inspired origins of the comeback. It has a nice, glossy finish on the pages, enhancing the feeling of going through an authentic magazine. The sans serif typography that's sprinkled throughout the album reminds me a lot of In Touch magazine, lending itself some more credibility to the concept. It utilizes your standprint colors cyan, magenta, or at the very least, a shade of pink and yellow typically found in tabloid magazines as well. Enhancing the experience are the small details such as the use of shapes with stars, rectangles and circles all lined with thick white or yellow strokes to catch your attention and add a bit more variety to the composition. Yellow also makes an appearance on the lyric pages, certain verses being highlighted giving a nice pop against the black and white pages. A line silver gradient can also be found on the bottom of certain pages, creating the illusion of a chrome effect on the paper pages. These final touches not only help aid to the reference of the medium itself but also creates a strong, consistent look for the zine. There's much to love with Spicy's zine, but also much to be frustrated with as well. Despite its clear reference to gossipy, tabloid magazines from the 2000s, the zine fails to deliver on the more campy side of its inspiration, feeling rather milquetoast in the final product. Give or take a few design choices, and flipping through the zine feels like flipping through a photo book with extra steps. Where is the outrageous headline slapped huge across the page? The more details on page 6 listed anywhere? The gossip? The over-exaggerated quotes? Style tips? Where is anything? The zine lacks substance, only going as far as to remind you of some of the terrible English lyrics this album has to offer by spreading them in big bold text on certain pages. I'm not one to typically give in to cringe culture, but reading some of these lines was extremely awkward. The page with salty and sweet lyrics nearly made me want to fling myself into the sun. Secret ingredients, plus between your reddening lips the potion is soaking in. Girls, what are we talking about? Like, another page reads news. They did it again and again. Like rough when we mess with you, girl, huh? On that same page, they used the magazine method of a zoom cut but then wrote what you wanna do, boy? Like, where is the correlation between this cut and thirsty lyrics? And we can't forget the extra corny ass I don't deal with the fake, no more. Every suffocating day I wanna stop. I don't know what you're looking for from now on, I'll tell you it's terrible to me. It's like the team studied the material but got lost on how to follow up on it. Next we move on to Welcome to My World zine, which so gracefully ruined this beautiful photo by plastering this ugly logo all uncensored on the cover. The Welcome to My World zine gives us more beat cuts from the music video, lending itself as an X feel that feels straight from the FX4 Walls handbook. Opposed to Spicy zine, this book has a paper finish that's more suitable for the concepts showcased throughout it. The lyric pages are easily the most competent design part of the zine, perfectly representing a piece of aespa's identity by meshing the real world with design that's breaking reality. While Spicy stuck to sans serif to convey text throughout its zine, Welcome to My World opted for your classic serif, mixing in pixelation in a way that reminds you of early Apple branding and even PC Music's art direction. The pixelation featured in the titles and the text as well are highlighted with huge white squares as well as glitched sections of the photos accompanying it. The entire thing has this very eerie, Windows blue screen feel. The juxtaposition to things we find natural and comforting to the sheer anxiety of the simulated glitch work creates a complex relationship between us and the work. It's reality blending at its simple form and it's brilliant. The simplicity of Welcome to My World zine is extremely enjoyable, a surprising feeling given that the group has been known for its more experimental approach to design over the years. The photo book was designed to allow you to sink your teeth into the beauty of our world before destroying it right before our eyes. During My World's promotion, I had wanted to see hints of data motion within the visual work and we never got it, so to see at least some actual glitch work within the physical release makes me extremely happy. It could have leaned a bit too close to birthday in regards to both featuring design techniques in the same vein, but this feels extremely fresh and fitting. My criticism with Welcome to My World zine mainly lies with its format, an issue I've begun to have with many photo books coming out of SM as of late. This photo book was primed for a story format, organizing the photos to visually show the progression of the girls leaving their apartment and venturing into the world until it becomes night. That is sadly not the case. Rather than feeling like it expands further where the music video and concept photos couldn't, the photo book just feels like the same rehash but even messier. Photos are simply thrown onto pages, no clever collage editing to make anything more visually harmonious, despite the fact that it would be simple to be more creative with it. On one page they straight up toss a picture and a randomized Polaroid together, and it's like, what's happening here? The same thing is done for Red Velvet's birthday photo book, but on a way more egregious level than this, so I guess point for aespa in that regard. Moving on to the most pointless version of this album, the poster version. Right off the bat I am very obsessed with SM selling a glorified digipack as some sort of new copy of this album. I will still admit that the package is a bit cooler than I initially wrote off. Seeing it unfold from your typical digipack to a huge poster did leave me with a much more positive outlook than my first initial reaction. The poster collage work isn't very adventurous, but in my opinion, does a much better job than the attempts done for the intro and scene versions. The design reminds me a lot of my work, and the logo work for each individual song shines the best in this format. The colors are great, the photos picked are perfect. As hilarious as it is, the one version of this album that quite literally shouldn't exist somehow, someway managed to be better than the aforementioned three that we just spoke about. There was a lot of thought put into the design and how it was organized. The jam-packed text, the city visuals, it's quite literally making my New York City maximalist heart sing. I'm shocked at how genuinely good this version is. Even the stickers included with this version are creative, with items that feature the song logos. These were first featured on their website during the era. There are 3 more versions to this album: the tabloid version, the SM Mini version, and the deluxe version. SM Minis were cute at first, but then I just realized it's pretty much a cash grab and gimmick, probably one of the most pointless Y2K trends we've brought back, sadly. The deluxe version was quite literally painful to see aespa in box, as I realized it was just a glorified merch box with nothing more to add to the interpretation of the album. Who asked for a scrunchie from aespa? Literally go to your local beauty supply store. I guarantee you they have a scrunchie just like this dog. Don't even get me started on the tote bag. Anyways, I brought it up just to acknowledge it because I know someone's gonna be annoying and say I forgot it. I didn't, I just don't care. Now on to the tabloid version. Unlike the previous photo books made for this album, the tabloid version is huge from the poster to its photo book. That's pretty much comparable to a newspaper, but of course, less dense given less pages. While the front of the photo book features a group shot, the design of the back is physical photos lined together, which is honestly beautiful. While this booklet features the same very annoying photo formatting technique, it's much better at organizing the content, and there's shots included that enhance the city feel of the concept with much more unique locations. The lyric pages located in the booklet are unfortunately as awkward as the intro version. Spicy's page is a banger, while I'm Unhappy looks quite out of place. Each of these versions come with its own CDR sleeves, none of which look any good. Welcome to My World just has the same photo used on the photo book, and Spicy's is just an uninteresting shot of the car. The sleeves for the intro version and the tabloid version are collages which are above the aforementioned sleeve designs, but still nothing to write home about. The most egregious act of design that happens within this is undoubtedly the CD design, which features the ugly ass My World logo puffed up. I think it's one thing to think this logo is so good that you slap it all over everything, but it's a whole nother ballpark having so much confidence in it that you slap it on every single CD and think that's cute. The last relevant thing to point out is the small pocket that holds the additional cards. For the zine version you receive 2, both purple colored. Welcome to My World is just a straightforward design with a logo to the front. Inside are small Polaroids. Given the nature concept, it was a neat choice and fits well here. For Spicy, the pocket was designed to match its photo book. It's described as a superstar card collector's edition, and it's easily one of the most fun things to come with this album. I wish I had more to say about it, but it's pretty straightforward. The design is inspired by collector cards that are more common in the West. I will say that WJSN did this concept slightly better simply by having their cards have a holographic sheen to it. aespa mainly did that for their photo cards and not on these, unfortunately. Still very pretty. So now that we got the same criticism and praise out the way, now it's time to usher in my full-blown rant and first-hand reaction to the album packaging, because I need to know who in this company lost their damn minds. I remember that one day I actually gave SM a compliment about not being teething capitalist whores like the folks at JYP Entertainment, you know, about album packaging being meaningful in intent even if sometimes not done right. Well, throw all of that out the fucking window, because apparently Chris Lee doesn't think we deserve nice things. This fucking mini album that has been pushed back for practically a year has the balls, the absolutely fucking gal, to have 5 separate versions. Are you fucking losing your mind? Are you sound? Are you okay in the head? In what world are we dedicating multiple versions of one album to a project with fucking 6 songs? I beg your pardon? Is the rest of the album located in these versions? Like, I couldn't believe it as I was going through the posts. Why the absolute fuck would you need a separate version for the posters? That shit comes with the regular fucking album package. Are we that poor at SM? Did Lee Solomon drain the company funds that much that now we're doing nonsense like this? The posters version is so nonsensical in its existence, it pisses me off. You don't need a separate album version for that whatsoever. Also, while I'm speaking on it, in general, please don't ever let companies trick you into believing any album needs more than 2 versions, because I can assure you 9 out of 10 times they don't, and that's certainly the case. We don't need 3 separate versions for the concepts. If your content organizing is so dogshit that you can't figure out how to combine the photos into one photo book, at max 2 photo books, then either you're incompetent or money hungry. Literally, I'll do their job right now and tell you how it could have easily been combined. The poster version is practically a digipack. Instead of making that its own separate thing, literally just include it with the tabloid version and replace the pointless CDR sleeve. Take the intro version and the Welcome to My World zine and combine that into one package. The intro version isn't even a full-blown concept on its own to justify having a completely separate version of it. The deluxe box shouldn't exist either. That's literal merch, babe. Just sell it on the store, or at the very least sell that with the SM Mini package instead, so at least the SM Mini wouldn't be pointless as hell. The way the album packages were split was giving very much grifter lane. It's corporate greed at its finest and left a really nasty taste in my mouth. I've never seen SM do something as egregious as this before, so I'm going to give them a pass this time around, but my eyes couldn't roll back further when they released the preview. Very ridiculous. Another thing that also made my eye twitch was the labeling of the packaging as well. Girl, why the fuck is the zine version not called the tabloid version and the tabloid version not called the strange NINI'S version? I feel like I'm losing my mind. The spicy zine's literal inspiration comes from tabloid magazines, while the tabloid version clearly does not. Despite the fact that the tabloid version is the size of a newspaper, none of the contents include design elements from tabloid journalism, so literally why the absolute fuck is it named that? At first I was trying my hardest to make an argument for them, saying that the strange phenomenon has a bit of paparazzi feel, but like, no, it does not. This is very much a Tumblr grunge photo shoot, much like Stamp on It was. Other than a few off-guards, this doesn't give paparazzi but more so paid photographer. So again, what the hell? To end this off, I do want to point out that if they did want to maximize their profits by splitting versions of this album, rather than what we got, they should have actually done separate packages for the track videos rather than the actual concept photos. It would have made more sense, given that those were clearly promotional content rather than something expected to be within the package on release. JYP does this with ITZY, and while I'm not a fan, it's at least more justifiable than this nonsense. Especially because with some of these versions, you aren't even getting the entire experience of the album, which is the entire fucking point of the physical package. Like, whoa, did we forget? Music videos, Welcome to My World and Spicy. Anyways, finally we have reached the end of the road with Welcome to My World and Spicy's music video, which has successfully entered into the Hall of Fame for SM Entertainment music videos that are directionless and have a flimsy correlation to the album's concept that it might as well be its own fucking thing. I knew from the teasers that this was going to be a hot, boring mess, and I was correct. My first complaint lies within the setting. It absolutely pisses me off that this entire album has been hopping around from location to location, none of which, mind you, was featured in any of the music videos. Spicy is of course a worse offender of this than Welcome to My World, but nonetheless, all staff are being locked up for it. To do an entire city concept for the album and then feature none of the city in either music video is such a slap in the face. I was extremely excited for that, given that I'm from NYC and I just love city life and think it's one of the most beautiful things that humans have fostered. It just felt really lame, especially because the city could have been easily incorporated into both. Welcome to My World could have easily started out with the girls in the city and we slowly see them branch out to the woods. Instead it's pointless meandering, 2 shots of buildings and we immediately cut to awkward shots of them wandering around. I think it's absolutely sinful that they are even in the woods, to be honest, especially since this city's so pretty with the lights on. Beachwood City, like to me, they should have been on top of a building at night looking on while all the city lights around them shine. It's not to say that's not possible, the music video literally starts with them on the top floor and the strange phenomenon photoshoot had that setting as well. I think I already mentioned it, but I'll just point out again that this music video also doesn't take advantage of the unsettling, creepy vibe from the music and how the song cleverly builds up with each chorus. The storyboard for this music video should have been way more cohesive than the vision we got, being that the song quite literally does all the heavy lifting for pacing. Spicy is straight up awful. I'm talking very generic, very boring, very America pandering. I've watched it twice. Once for this video and I'm never tuning back in. Like if you were going to do a college concept, or should I say a glamorized version of college, why not have the music video's plot be focused on the girls starting a sorority called Spicy Club, since the Pinterest board was always in the works. That would have been more fun and interesting to watch rather than the girls speak about being so bad, but you never get that with the visuals. It gave very much for shy girls who keep to themselves. They never interact with anyone outside of each other in it. It just felt like any group would have substituted here, which is sad because music videos like Savage and Black Mamba prove that aespa has their own flavor that very rarely could be duplicated. While I enjoyed the breadcrumbs of this and the eyes for the text messages on Karina's part, a month later I feel like even that part was sort of lame. Had they done the sorority idea, maybe we could have seen the girls chatting with them on FaceTime or some shit while typing up something. Like, I don't know, I don't fuck with any of the music video, I'm crying. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I know I was sort of harsh. No apology for that, just wanted to acknowledge it cause I don't care, I'm crying. Hope you enjoyed this full creative direction review though. This took a long time to do, especially because my albums took forever to come. I went into a lot of detail, more than usual, so let me know if that was even worth it. I guess LMFO. Okay, bye straw besties, love you, see you on the next one.